You did? Okay. Very good. I don't know if that's picking up or not. So we're going to talk through in more detail some of the same themes that we just talked about in the big talk. That talk was, as you noticed, kind of an overview of the whole book of Ephesians, some of the high spots of the whole book of Ephesians to explain this plan. I want to bore down into Ephesians chapter 2, starting in verse 11. So if you've got Bibles, I'm going to put up every text I talk about pretty much here on the screen, every text from Ephesians, but I find it comforting to have my own text when somebody's doing that. So if you want to, I'd encourage you to get your Bibles out and let's look at these texts together as we read them. So Ephesians chapter 2, verses 11 and 12, we have this picture of how bad things are. Paul loves to do, if you were in the class yesterday, he loves to do what I call the eucatastrophe move. In a lot of literature and drama, we have the catastrophe move. Things are going well, and then horrible stuff happens. The bottom drops out. Paul loves to do the opposite. He will talk about how bad things are so that he can show how Christ created the opposite effect, a eucatastrophe, a good turn, a change for the better. So he talks about the badness in chapter 2, verses 11 and 12. Therefore remember that formerly you who are Gentiles by birth and called uncircumcised by those who call themselves the circumcision, which is done in the body by human hands. Remember that at that time you were separate from Christ, excluded from citizenship in Israel, foreigners to the covenants of the promise, without hope and without God in the world. Okay, I want to focus on that separated language. Of course, he says separated in about a million ways there, but I want to focus on that separated language because, as we just talked about in there, I think Ephesians just really harps on this idea that one of the ways darkness works in our world is through disunity. And that one of the ways God works in our world is by us finding ways to overcome disunity and to find harmony. Now, that's different from dictatorship. A lot of times people think of the rule of God ruling, God's will being done, as somehow suppressing us or making us less, that God somehow has to crush us down. The only thing in us that needs to be crushed for God's will to be done is the bad stuff. Because when I am doing God's will, I'm also doing the best will I have. The best things in me are coming out. I am on board with God's program. And so God has this plan to let what I was created for begin to be manifested. What was I created for? Well, we just talked about that. I'm created to be God's image on earth, so that God's will can be done on earth as it is in heaven. So every place there's a human being, what's planned? Every place there's a human being, there's a little spot where God's will is being done on earth. Unselfishly, I sacrifice myself so that God's will can be done here on earth. And that is my own purpose. That is actually where I am the most human I can be. We're terrible at that. We have managed to mess that up in amazingly creative and inventive ways. Adam and Eve are nothing compared to the rest of us. We each one of us find our own forbidden fruit and just chomp it down. We find ways to say, no, I know you're God and all, and I know you've been blessing me my whole life, and I know I'm supposed to want your will to be done, but I'm really smarter in this one case. I just know better. And I'm going to have my will be done here and now because I just don't get why you're saying what you're saying. Again and again and again, that's been the human story. Human beings, as soon as they deviate from their nature to do God's will on earth, they are ashamed. They have to run and hide. They fight with each other. They start hurling accusations, And that's the story of the human race forever. Separation, disunity. The picture God has in mind is of each person doing their part, and the whole thing working together in beautiful harmony. That's the picture of unification. All things kind of drawn together in unity under the head. So, Jesus is going to bring unity out. Nope, let's keep back. We don't get the good stuff yet. We still got to stay in the bad stuff for a minute. Jesus is going, as we talked about in the big session, Jesus is going to bring order into the entire universe. Human beings are rebelling against God. But there are elements that are non-human that are rebelling against God too. And Ephesians and Colossians, maybe more than any other books in the Bible, talk about the non-human powers and authorities that are rebelling against God. It'd be weird if you'd been in the church very long and you hadn't heard a sermon on the Christian armor, right? That's at the end of Ephesians chapter 6. Put on the shield of faith and the sword of the Spirit. And what's that about, though? What's the context of that? We did VBS just recently. We had all the children build the armor, the armor of God. And they put, night by night, they built the different pieces. And it was pretty cool by the end. They had all the armor on. But what's the context of that? Our struggle is not against flesh and blood. We constantly are tricked by the real ones we're struggling against to thinking, yeah, but I really need to fight you. I constantly think I need to fight you, flesh and blood. But the real struggle is different. There are powers and authorities that are also disunified, that are not doing the will of God. I think they were created to do the will of God. They are intended to carry out the will of God, but they are in one way or another in rebellion. How would you like to understand those rebellious powers and authorities? How would you like to, by the end of this class, really figure them out? Too bad! We don't know. Anybody who tells you they know what those powers and authorities are is going to end up charging you money. I'm not kidding. The Bible is unclear, really dramatically unclear, about all of those dark forces. And maybe that's deliberate. I don't know. There are ministries. I don't know if there are ministries in your cultures, but in our culture, there is a ministry that really just, if you've got problems, if you've got a sex addiction or alcohol addiction, or if you're having trouble with anger, we gotta do kind of a genealogy of the demons in your family. We gotta figure out who in your family has opened themselves up to demonic forces, and maybe it was you, maybe it was your father, maybe it was your grandmother, and we gotta go back. We gotta find out their names so that we can properly bind them with the power of Jesus Christ, and we gotta bring them out of you to have a conversation with them, to talk to you. Really? The Bible says, you know what you need to know about the dark forces? They're defeated by Jesus Christ. You do not need... The worst thing you can do is research the dark forces. They love it if you get really interested in them. That's how they get you. You don't need to be researching the dark forces. You need to be researching Jesus Christ. You need to be connecting your head to Him. And the dark forces are going to be, if they are bothering you, which they do, they're going to be defeated. They're going to be swept up in the defeat that He's inflicting on them, that He inflicted on them at the cross, and He's continuing to inflict on them. And that's the real truth about that. Our struggle is not against flesh and blood. What chapter 1 promises is Jesus Christ is head over whatever's out there. The Bible never makes it real clear what they are. There's something going on that's non-human that hates us and hates God's will. Whatever's out there, God has made Christ head, and eventually everything, one way or another, will submit to Christ's headship. That's the process that's going on in you, the church. Christ is head over the entire universe on behalf of His body, which is the church. That's the promise in which we live. And so whatever dark forces are out there, whatever powers and authorities are out there, they are going to be conquered partly by what you guys are doing as you continue to serve the church and to make the church prosper and to make the church be what God called it to be. Jesus will restore order to the universe. So as we talked about in the big talk out there, the first stage, perhaps, or the great early demonstration of Christ's ability to reunite the cosmos is this solving this ridiculously hard problem of the alienation of the Gentiles. Let's be honest. God had a purpose for the nation of Israel when it was living in the land to keep separate from the Gentiles. When the Israelites land in Palestine, in the promised land, they needed to keep distance between themselves and the Canaanites, because otherwise they would just assimilate and there would be no God identity in that land. And so a lot of the laws are designed to keep the Gentiles away. Circumcise your children. When you eat, you have to eat out of bowls that are cleansed in this way. When you live, you need to live in houses that the walls are kept pure in this way. The food you put in your mouth has to meet these specific specifications. Can you have, the Gentile couple over the next street? Can you have them over for a meal? Can you go over to their house? No. Nobody wants to, be purified for the next month just because of a dinner party. And so they're designed to keep the Gentiles away. During the period of the land promise, during the period of the, earthly Jerusalem and the land, they served a good purpose. But Jesus came. And though the Gentiles were kept at arm's length by the law, Jesus came and removed those go ahead and click it now, took away those dividing walls of hostility that kept the Gentiles at arm's length. And that's what Paul has realized, and that's what he's trying to help his group, this group that he's talking to, realize. Now in Christ Jesus, you who were once far away have been brought near by the blood of Christ. For he himself is our peace, who has made the two groups one, and has destroyed the barrier, the dividing wall of hostility, by setting aside in his flesh the law with its commands and regulations. His purpose was to create in himself one new humanity out of the two, thus making peace, and in one body to reconcile both of them to God through the cross, by which he put to death their hostility. In other words, Jesus Christ in the cross did so many different things. You and I talk about, I don't know, does anybody have in your own culture a phrase that's similar to ours, to kill two birds with one stone? Do you say that same thing, or what do you say?
Same thing, basically, like doing two things with just one shot.
Yeah. Well, that's a pretty big trick for us, for human beings to kill two birds with one stone, to do two things with one action. God, however, seems to be able to do I don't know how many things with just one action. And the cross of Christ seems to do so many things. We don't seem to be able to get to the bottom of all the things that were accomplished in the cross of Christ. And so one of the things that happens, Paul says, in the cross of Christ is the dividing separation is taken away, because the law, specifically especially those parts of the law that created the barrier of hostility, are taken away by the cross of Christ, because it's no longer appropriate. Because God's people are no longer meant to be confined to the land. Where are God's people supposed to be now? What did Jesus say? I want you to go to Jerusalem, sure. But then Judea, and then to Samaria, and then to the whole world. And so it makes no sense to continue those parts of the law that are tied to the land promise when the people of God are meant to break out of the land and to be everywhere. To begin to approximate what was the original intention for human beings. Fill the whole earth. Every place a human being is, there's the image of God. There's the will of God being done on earth as it is in heaven. That's the plan. We're going to spread out and be those image bearers wherever we are. But if you do that, trying to go and also enforce the rules of the law that say, oh, but, if you're a Gentile, you're not welcome in my house because I keep these rules about, my walls and my plates and no, cheeseburgers. And so I keep all of these rules. And so you're not welcome and I'm not welcome. I don't feel comfortable coming to your... Those rules make no more sense. And in fact, if you analyze the way the New Testament talks about the food laws, those are the parts of the laws that are abrogated, that are transcended by Jesus Christ. Those parts that were set up to keep the Gentiles out. The other parts of the law that are transcended by Jesus Christ are the parts that are designed to create distance between us and God. That's another lecture. Not today. So Jesus in the cross has done this amazing thing. He has brought the Gentiles near. He has separated out. He has removed that separating, that dividing wall of hostility. I think you probably have heard this before, but archaeologists have actually found evidence of this dividing wall of hostility that circled the physical temple in Jerusalem. This may be what Paul has in mind, or it may just be a metaphor, but there literally was a wall about that high around the temple proper in the court of the Gentiles in the Jerusalem temple that Jesus would have known, that Paul would have known. There was the temple buildings itself, which had the court of the women, and then this small little covered porch that was the court of Israel where the men could go, and then the court of the priests, which was open to the air so the sacrifice could go out. And around, at a distance from that, there was this low fence, and it had, in 3 languages, it had a death threat. If you're a Gentile and you cross this line, it's your own fault that you get killed, basically. Said it in 3 different languages. You're going to die, and it's your own fault because you've been warned. Don't cross this line. Could there anything be more obviously the dividing wall of hostility? At least it makes it manifest, the dividing wall of hostility. Sure, Gentiles, you're welcome to come this far to get close to our God. You wonder why the Jewish religion had not made more converts. Even though the prophet said, the nations will come streaming in. Zion will be lifted up. People will come. How come they don't want to come any closer? How come they don't want to come any closer? Because the dividing wall of hostility. And Paul said, an amazing thing has happened. A mystery has happened. Jesus Christ has taken away that dividing wall of hostility that keeps the Gentiles out. And he's done it in order to create, as I talked about in the other class, a new human race. Yesterday I talked about scary movies that kind of, I think, have an insight into humanity that maybe more sophisticated literature doesn't. How many popular level movies can you think of in recent years have to do with the theme of human beings finally, evolving into something higher?
X-Men.
The X-Men. That's one. The Transformer. That's another. What else?
Walk the line.
What? Johnny Cash never evolved into anything except an older version of Johnny Cash. I'm sorry, dude. And that's on the record, right? Yeah, it's interesting. Star Wars is about trust the Force, like the original the good Star Wars. Trust the Force. Reach out with your feet. You're so much more than you think you. There's this new kind of human you could just become. Even total pagans know there's something greater we're supposed to be. Christianity says that's right. You're actually supposed to be what God created you to be. The image of God. And instead you've tried to be your own little image. You've shrunk yourselves down to your own little kingdom running around on the earth. My will be done, my will be done, my will. Turns out your will is small and damaging. Kind of toxic. It's hurting the people around you, it's hurting you. It's dishonoring your Creator. Over and 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 over again, people are ripping themselves apart by trying to create their own kingdom. And Paul says, Jesus Christ, by his blood on the cross, has created the next stage of human evolution. The new human. One new human out of the two. It was very common for the Jews to think of Gentiles as not quite human. It was also very common for the Gentiles to think of the Jews as not quite human. As we talked about in the other class, that's racism's shtick. Every place you find it is, well, they look human, but they're not really human like us. They don't deserve the treatment I would give to a real human being. They don't deserve equal rights. They don't deserve equal dignity. They don't, because they aren't real human. And Jesus Christ says, this is the new humanity. And it transcends race. It transcends everything that the powers and authorities try to throw up to say to you, you are separate from those people over there. Jesus Christ says no. By the blood of Jesus Christ, I want you to be united. Everyone else who has been saved by the blood of Jesus Christ. This is a hard lesson. I'm going to talk a little bit about this tonight in the keynote. Every division in Christianity about anybody who says they follow Christ, however weird the form of following Christ looks to us, every division is a blemish on the bride of Christ. This is my conviction. And I think, based on the theology of Ephesians, the burden of proof is on us for every division that exists. Now, the divisions that exist within the body of Christianity, broadly speaking, we didn't make them last week. They have developed over centuries. And so we're not likely to clear them up next week. But I'm telling you, it is a blemish on the body of Christ. Christ did this amazing thing. Nobody would have thought the Jews and the Gentiles could sit together at the Lord's table. He overcame that disunity and brought them together and created it. It wasn't perfect. There was all kinds of fights about it, even in the first century. Continues to be times when the church is divided up along racial lines. That still happens. It will continue to happen because the church is, half the time it's a failure. Nevertheless, Jesus pulled this off, this unification off. Every time we split in any way, it's a blemish on the church. And within your churches, when you fight for unity, when you fight to bear with, to have patience, do all those things that he talks about in chapter 4, when you're fighting to do that, you are fighting to make manifest the vision of Ephesians that Christ really is the one who's going to unify the whole universe together. It's worth doing. I know the people in your church are more irritating than the people in my church. I understand. I know. I must have wonderful people in my church to be even saying this stuff that I'm saying. But I'm telling you, when you manage to put up with them and manage to maintain the unity, every time you do that, you are revealing to the world and to yourselves and to each other that Jesus Christ really is Lord. What's the name of your church? Talamban? Nope, I can't say it. I'm sorry. What would the people in your town or your city think if you had a sign on your church that said, "School for Devils"? How many of you think that would be good advertising for your church? School for devils. Okay. I don't think you should put that on your church. But in Ephesians chapter 3, Paul actually makes a claim that I overlooked for years, which amounts to saying that when we pull off the unification that he's talking about in chapter 2, we actually are taking the powers and authorities, those dark spirits, we are taking them to school. We are teaching them a lesson. We are teaching them something that they are resisting learning. And when they see what we do, they are learning it. Paul creates this amazing picture of Christian unity. Let's go to the next slide. He came and preached peace to you who were far away and peace to those who are near, for through him we both have access to the Father by the one Spirit. Consequently, you are no longer foreigners and strangers, but fellow citizens with God's people and also members of his household. In other words, think about everything he said about the Gentiles, aliens, strangers, all of those things. That's all been reversed. You've been adopted into the family. You are exactly on equal footing with the most Jewish Jew that's in the church. Absolutely part of the family. And it gets better. The next slide. Built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, with Christ Jesus himself as the chief cornerstone, in him the whole building is joined together and rises to become a holy temple to the Lord. And in him too, you two are being built together to become a dwelling in which God lives by his Spirit. That's an amazing claim. I love that. Because what's it saying? Gentiles raised, possibly the oil of Apollo put on their head when they were born. Sacrifices to Dionysus given when they had their birthdays. Possibly, every day a small offering to Zeus. Absolute pagans. As unholy, as impure as you can imagine. Taken and made into a piece of God's temple. Right? That's the image. To even be a part of God's temple, you had to be touched only by, the chosen tribe of Israel, carved by the Levites in a separate place and then brought in so there wouldn't be the sound of, to be a part of the temple was to be sacred by nature. Here are rank pagans, mired their whole lives in paganism, now brought in just as much as any Jewish person and made a part of God's temple. It's a grand, grand picture of inclusion, of absolute defeat of those powers that say, no, separation. You can only be great if those people are pushed down. It's a great picture, and it teaches the devils a lesson. And that's what this next passage, or set of passages, talks about. Turn over. Go ahead and click. Yeah, you already did it. You are way ahead of me, man. Thank you. So, if you're in Ephesians, go ahead to chapter 3. Basically, we have one of these moments where Paul's brain runs ahead of himself. So he starts a thought in verse 1 of chapter 3 of Ephesians. And he doesn't come back to that thought till around verse 14. So he starts a thought, that triggers another thought, and so he spends verses 2 through 13 exploring that second thought. And then around verse 14 he says, oh yeah, now what I was saying back up in verse 1, let me continue that thought. And he continues on. It's that second thought that I want to explore with you a little bit, because I actually think it talks about how we teach the devils a lesson by our unity. It's really strange. Surely, he says, you've heard about the administration of grace that's been given to me. God's grace that was given to me for you. That is, the mystery made known to me by revelation, as I've already written briefly. In reading this, then, you'll be able to understand my insight into the mystery of Christ, which was not made known to people in other generations, and has now been revealed by the Spirit to God's holy apostles and prophets. The Jews who were not Christians, did they believe what Paul was saying? No, they didn't. They had been studying the law for centuries. They had, in some cases, knew as much about the law as Paul did. Maybe, he probably wouldn't admit this, but maybe some of them knew even more about the law than he did. So he has a problem. How come they don't see what God's doing? How come they don't get it? What's Paul's answer? They've studied and studied and studied. How come they don't get it? It's been a mystery. And in fact, a mystery, the way Paul uses mystery, it's almost a technical term for him. It's one of those things that kind of has this characteristic. It's not something human beings, even with God's written word, can figure out until the proper time, until God makes it known. And so he says, now it's being revealed by God's apostles and prophets. It's a mystery that now it's being revealed. In other words, because of Jesus Christ, we now can see the pattern that has been hidden up to now in the whole Old Testament. Now we go back, and where somebody who's a classical Jew would say, oh, when God comes to Abraham, it means the Jews are special. We are separate from everybody else. But we go back and remember that God said, Abraham, you're special, and through you I'm going to bless all the nations. We talk about the Sinai experience, and God says, I picked you up and carried you on eagle wings, and that means Israel is special. But if we're Christians, we go back and realize, because Israel is going to be a priesthood. If you're a priest, who are you a priest for? Yourself? Is Israel a priesthood for itself? Who is it a priest for?
The nations.
For the nations. Yeah, exactly. In other words, Paul, because of Jesus Christ, Paul and the other apostles and prophets of the New Testament are beginning to go back through the Old Testament. This was here all along, but now we have the key that unlocks the mystery that's been there the whole time. God has been planning to do this the whole time. This separation between the Jews and the Gentiles. This always had an expiration date. It always had a time when it was going to end, when God's worldwide kingdom was going to be announced. And then the separation made no sense, because all the nations were meant to be brought in. All the nations were meant to be blessed. All the nations were meant to be included in the flowering of God's plan in Israel. He says this is the mystery that's taking place. Let's see the next slide. This mystery is that through the gospel, the Gentiles, the nations, are heirs together with Israel, members together in one body, and sharers together in the promise of Christ. This is just what he said. He said, this is the ministry that I get to carry out. Paul says, this is what I get to do. I'm a missionary. And I'm specifically the apostle to the Gentiles. I get to go and talk to the Gentiles about this new amazing thing. They get to be included in the grand story of God's people. They get to participate. I became a servant of this gospel by the gift of God's grace given me by the working of his power. Although I'm less than the least of all the Lord's people, this grace was given to me to preach to the Gentiles the boundless riches of Christ. So Paul says, I get to do this. This is my great privilege that I get to be a part of God's plan of bringing in all the nations. The prophet said it was going to happen. And lo and behold, I'm saying these words. I go to these cities. Where does Paul always go first when he goes to these cities? He tries to preach to the Jews every time, right? Who responds overwhelmingly, city after city? The Gentiles. Sometimes a few Jews, of course, but overwhelmingly, it's the Gentiles. He just sees this happening all the time. It's like the prophets, it's like Isaiah's words are coming true right in his presence. He can't stop himself from seeing this taking place. God's mystery is being enacted every time I do mission work, he says. What does that mean? Next slide. Although I'm the least of all the Lord's people, this grace was given me to preach to the Gentiles the boundless riches of Christ and to make plain to everything the administration of this mystery, which in ages past has been kept hidden. His intent was that now, through the church, verse 10 is the Easter egg. I consider this the weirdest verse in Ephesians, and Ephesians has a lot of weird verses. This is the strangest verse. Verse 10. His intent was that now, through the church, the manifold wisdom of God should be made known to the rulers and authorities in the heavenly realms. Do the angels know that God's wise? They agree, right? They sing praises all the time. Holy, holy, holy. We got that from the angels. They're the ones who say that. Which powers and authorities in the heavenly realms are questioning whether God's wise? The bad ones, right? The powers and authorities that we're struggling with, not flesh and blood. Powers and authorities in the heavenly realms, in the spiritual realms. That's who we're struggling with. Right now, God bringing in the Gentiles into the church. God making it so that through the blood of Jesus Christ, a Jew will sit next to a Gentile and share a meal. That a Jew will allow himself to be baptized by a Gentile into the name of Christ. That Jews and Gentiles will put their money together in order to feed the poor. That's happening right now. That's an amazing testimony to the world. Who else is it testified to? School for devils. Isn't that strange? Because the demons, the powers and authorities, their stock in trade is splitting us apart. We don't know much about them, but we know their stock in trade is separation, is isolation, is disunity. They want you to find reasons to hate other people. They want you to find reasons not to be able to trust other people. They want you to find reasons not to be able to be in fellowship with other people. And of all the things of the first century that the demons thought they had a lock on, it was this hatred between the Jews and the Gentiles. And Paul says, every time I preach the gospel and a new multiracial church is started, where different races that should hate each other start loving each other and ministering together. Every time that happens, the demons go, whoa, I did not see that coming. I cannot believe God pulled that off. I cannot believe Jesus Christ did that. What's the payoff for us today? This is one reason why I feel, I'm not kidding about this at all, our ability to put up with the people in our church. A church is not perfect. The church constantly needs to be made better. It needs to be reformed. It needs to be restored. It always needs to be. And we need to be open to God's leading to do what's better. But our ability to maintain unity as we do that, when the powers and authorities are trying to split us apart, our ability to come back together and move to be a better church, our ability to do that is teaching the devils to listen. That God is greater and that Christ, in fact, is head of the entire universe. And one day, one way or another, your knee will bow and your tongue will confess Jesus Christ is Lord. Okay, thanks very much, you guys. I appreciate your help today.